Just wanted to make a quick video over here about electric cars and Teslas in general, full self-driving, and what halacha says about this. I don't think anyone else really talked about this, and I just wanted to talk about it. And I think a lot of rabbis aren't aware of some of the shilas, but I think a lot of rabbis are certainly aware of a lot of the issues. First of all, a major shilah that comes up is someone who's already part of hatzala. So he's already part of hatzala, and he has a heter, and he should be driving on Shabbos in certain situations to save a life. So now the shilah becomes: is it preferable for him to either lease or own an electric car? So the answer in short is yes, and for numerous reasons. Number one is that when a person drives a gas car, when they turn it on and every single time they hit the pedal, those are isurim deraisa every single time. That is like making a fire, havara. A person is not allowed to make a fire on Shabbos. Not allowed to make a fire on Shabbos. Period. And it's an issur deraisa. So that exists specifically with an ICE car or internal combustion engine or gas. However, with electric cars, pretty much according to most opinions, that doesn't apply. It's an issur derabanon, according to most opinions, electricity in general. The Chazon Ish holds deraisa, and that's why in Bnei Brak they have generators and they're very stringent. But for the most part, it is a problem medeorisa. So therefore, it definitely would be preferable for someone in hatzala to get an electric car. If it's an inconvenient for him, he doesn't want an electric car for whatever reason it is. If he lives in an apartment, he doesn't have a place to conveniently charge, fine, he's not obligated to get an electric car. But if a person has two cars, one is electric and one isn't electric, and he's part of hatzala, he should definitely be getting in the electric car on Shabbos. There's no question there. That's the first discussion, which then leads into the next discussion, which is about full self-driving technology, fully autonomous vehicles, or as Tesla calls it, FSD, full self-drive. So other electric cars don't have this technology, certainly not like Tesla. You have certain self-driving Waymo, whatever they want to come up with in California over there and other things. But at the end of the day, the thing that people are driving, at least in our area, in New York, is Teslas. So there is a full self-driving. Sodom and Hatzala definitely isn't obligated to get it. And going to the hatzala call anyways, when you're going, no one should be using it because it's it's slower, especially when you're going through red lights and traffic signs, obviously in a careful way. But when you're rushing for an emergency, every single second matters for medical emergencies, and therefore the person in the hatzala car who's driving should definitely not be using the full self-driving because it's slower. Even on the fast mode, there are three modes. Even on the fast mode, the hurry mode, it's still slower. So, therefore, definitely on the way there, you shouldn't be using the full self-driving. The shaila becomes on the way back. So on the way back from the hatzala call, so things get interesting. I spoke to people who are part of hatzala. Actually, two of my current chavrusas now are part of hatzala. Both excellent, great people. I'm not going to name them, but they're great people. I've spoken to three from people from hatzala from three different areas. Number one, obviously, the area over here, the Five Towns Far Rockaway area, and number two, Queens, and number three is technically Far Rockaway is part of Queens, is Baltimore. So it seems like in Baltimore, interestingly enough, it seems like there's less people there. There's still a lot of Jewish people, but there are less people there, and therefore, what their protocol is, you leave your car where the site was, the medical situation, and what you do is you get a lift back from someone else. They have a special company, taxi service, whatever, Uber, and you get a ride back. And they open the door for you and everything, so you do the least amount of melachos as possible. And after Shabbos is a service that they drive the cars back home. However, in Queens it's different. It could very well be because there are more Jews. So what they do instead in Queens is that they you drive home. And the protocol is that after you drive home, if there's any sort of call that's going out for hatzala at all, so the person who's already in the car is the one who's going to take the call since he's already in the car. So it seems like near Lafini Saiti, which means according to my humble opinion, that it would be preferable to use the full self-driving on the way back from the hatzala call. And the reason is simple. All you do is you plug in the address of where you want to go, and then the car just drives you there. So that's better than doing physical maneuvers with the steering wheel, with your feet, even though you might not be hitting the brakes one pedal drive, still, every single time you touch that, you're violating a malacha. So, therefore, on Shabbos Yontif, it seems like, for someone who is part of hatzala, in an area where the minhag for hatzala is to drive back, so then that's what should be done. A person should be using the full self-driving back. Which now goes into the next question. Is it even halachically permissible to use a full self-driving car or an autonomous vehicle? So this subject, to my knowledge, no one has talked about yet. No big rabbis, and it's not in print. There hasn't been any sort of shiurim on it. Not that I've looked around. I don't listen to shiurim. I really very rarely listen to shiurim. I am more of a person who learns from Sfarim, but I have listened to many shiurim. Don't get me wrong, I've listened to thousands, but I'm pretty much primarily learning Sfarim all day, with other people, chavrusas, giving shiurim. But to my knowledge, I would assume that no one really talked about this. And the reason for this is simple because it's relatively new technology, and a lot of rabbis don't know anything about it because they don't have electric cars, and if they do, they probably don't have the full self-driving. Many big rabbis who are older, who are big poskim, they have no clue about the shaila. So this is a whole shir in of itself, but basically the pasuk says in Devarim Perek Daled, "V'nishmartem lo b'nafshosechem," which means that we have to be healthy. We shouldn't be doing things that are dangerous and could physically get us in trouble or mentally, and we have to be careful. So therefore, the question arises regarding the using the full self-driving, which is, and it's something that the truth is already got discussed with companies and organizations in America, which Tesla has to go through, approving the full self-driving technology and making sure that it's safe on the roads. It's been approved. People are using it, and there are a lot of lawsuits, and people are getting sued. At the end of the day, from someone who has been an owner and has been driving in a Tesla for well over a year now, probably closer to a year and a half or 2 years, and has been and using this for 5 months, because 5 months Tesla gave us a free subscription of the full self-drive technology. First of all, it's an amazing. I can't think of anything in my lifetime. I'm 34 right now that I've been more impressed with from a technological perspective, a more amazing technology. I never thought that I would live to see the day. I thought it was going to be flying cars. I never thought I would see a car Pasha driving itself. It's an amazing concept. However, there are definitely instances that I've been in that if I wouldn't have taken over, I would have been dead, or I would have been in a major accident, life-threatening situations. Now, very few instances, but there have been very cases which were very, very dangerous and very, very close. That being said, a person has to heed the warnings. The truth is that now with the software updates, the car makes sure that your eyes are on the road. It watches your eyes, and you don't even need to touch the steering wheel anymore, most of the times. And your eyes have to be on the road. So if a person's looking at their screen and trying to learn while they're driving, so they have to be very careful. You have to know. If it's one thing if you're at a red light and you're not driving anyways and you want to look at the screen, fine. And the car won't tell you to look. You don't need to look then because you're not driving. It's another thing when you're going 75 miles per hour on a highway. So a person has to know how many cars are on the road. Is it straight? Is it windy? You have to be vigilant and you have to at least be looking out of the corner of your eye. So is it permissible to use the thing? I think it's permissible to use the thing, but a person has to be very careful. And it's the same thing with the stay in lane cruise control that they have. And I would say even more so, you have to be careful because other cars, not Teslas, depends on the vehicle, they're not as good as staying on the lane. And sometimes it could swerve off the lane and you might not realize if you're not paying attention. And at the same time, any driver has an obligation to pay attention to the road at all times. There are people who are multitasking and doing other activities when they're driving, texting, and all these things. It's terrible. And if a person's doing that, especially if they're not in full self-driving, you have to be very careful. And even if you're in the full self-drive, you have to be very, very careful with these things. So is it halachically permissible? I think it is. Will there be deaths that happen from full self-driving? 100%. Even in 30 years when the technology gets better, 100% there's going to be deaths. The question is, will the injuries and deaths be as much as regular, just manual driving or person driving? There's going to be deaths from driving unfortunately, there's always going to be deaths. The question is, when will one outweigh the other? But I think that this really should be looked into more, and there's a lot more to say about this. These are just my initial thoughts about it. If it's permissible or not, I think it is, but a person has to be very careful, even at the same time. Another halachic and hashkafic discussion regarding electric cars is that one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of them personally, and or this is already, I think, 4 years, 4 or 5 years since I've been driving in electric cars. We got thrown a very good deal for the Nissan Leaf during COVID. It's already 2015, so 6 years almost. We got thrown a very good lease at the time. It was like $180 a month for a Nissan Leaf. And that was the first electric car that we drove. And that was our lease. And an amazing vehicle. And Nissan has been producing electric cars for close to 10 years, and there was not one issue with the car. Never needed to bring it into the dealership once in 2 years. Over 15,000 miles, I think we drove on it. No issue at all. Amazing vehicle. And one of the considerations is you don't need to waste time going to a gas station. Bittelsman. Another consideration, which is great for a Ben Torah who's going to be learning anyways, if you wouldn't have been at that gas station, one less errand to do. And also the gas is expensive. It's expensive. So it's cheaper. Person, you have to do your own cheshbonos and do your own math in terms of from a practical monetary perspective. But Lamaisa, it's cheaper at the end of the day. It costs what 2 gallons of cost up for me to fill this thing up and to have a full charge to go 300 miles. That's what it costs. It's literally $6 at home. On a fast charger, supercharger, it's more expensive, depends which one you use, the location you use it, etc. But nevertheless, it's cheaper at the end of the day because 99% of the time you're going to be charging at home. So that's something to consider also when it comes to electric vehicles, and that was something that why we got and now why we have 2 electric cars. It's the Bittelsman and it's the Bittel Mammon, and that brings me to the last issue, which is I've gotten looks from people and a lot of comments, oh, fancy this, that, Tesla electric car, and for other electric car, the Ioniq 5, they're both great vehicles. We were one of the first people to get the Ioniq 5 in the United States, and they're both great vehicles. Now already, more and more people are getting them because they're seeing that the prices just make sense. And multiple people have already contacted me. They wanted my knowledge about electric cars and prices and different questions that they had. There are a lot of new questions that come up, just like solar panels and all of these things. And at the end of the day, you have to map it out yourself. The numbers, they just don't lie. A R7-seater Tesla, right, which is instead of a minivan, is cheaper than a brand new minivan in the long run, and especially if you get the federal tax credit for $8,000. So if you add it up, it ends up being cheaper. So that's money that you could do good things with. You could support Torah with that. You could support stucco with that, etc. You could use that for more positive things. So that's also something to consider. Which brings to my last point. People have been saying, oh, maybe driving around in that, it's an ayin hara. Look, it's a good point. It's legitimate. I would say there's a difference between driving in a $100,000 Model S or $100,000 $150,000 Lucid, $200,000 Lucid, an expensive Porsche, versus driving in a base Model 3 or Model Y. It's just cheaper. The numbers make sense. The lease price for a Model 3 right now. And by the way, I'm not the only rabbi that drives a Tesla. And someone else, one of my chavrusas, a certain Rav in the community, he's looking into now getting an electric car. And he's looking at the lease price, and if you roll in with a down payment, it's like $400. $400 a month. So what does a gas car cost to lease? A brand new one. And plus, then factor in the oil changes and getting the gas, the money doesn't lie. So the ayin hara, look, something to talk about, something to consider. I think as time goes on and electric cars get more common, and they already are pretty common, that problem doesn't exist. I know what I need to do for my own personal avodas Hashem and Bittelsman and for my family and finances, which makes more sense. And the numbers just don't lie. Do it on paper. So those are just around 5 different ideas and halachas, hashkafas that I just wanted to make this quick video about. about electric cars. I think it's something that people would find interesting. And, in terms of the ayin hara, the showing off business, you know, you got to know yourself. You have to be comfortable with yourself and what you do. And if it makes sense, you got to do it. Just like the people who contacted me, they said the lease prices, they're a great price. If you're gonna buy it, you have to make the cheshbon, because when you buy it, remember, you get the $8,000 back federal tax credit. Until now, that's in New York. At a federal level, you get 7,500 back. On a state level in New York, you get 500. In places like Baltimore, you get like $12,000 back. It's crazy. Each state has its own rules from a state level. You have to know also taxes, you have to make money on the books, all of that. But it's all consideration, and it just comes to a number games. Think about how much money gas costs a year. I would argue the average Jewish family spends $3,000 a year on gas, or certainly 2,000. Just do the numbers. How much do you spend a week on gas, or how much do you spend a month on gas? You have to do the numbers. If you're spending around $150 a month on gas, which I would say is a low estimate, 150 times 10, so that's 1,500 plus another 300 for the other 2 months in the year. So that's already close to $2,000 that we're talking about over here. That's $1,800. High times whatever it is, right? High times so so person has to make those cheshbonos, and figure out what works for him and what's best for his avodas Hashem. So that's basically the quick video I wanted to put out. I figured it would be an interesting video. It will get views. It's really Torah related. I'm not trying to give a demonstration over here of the car and talk about the features and all of this and all of that. I just wanted to say from a halachic perspective and some hashkafas of what I thought, and that's basically what I wanted to say. So everyone, drive safe out there, and be careful on the roads, because there's some crazy drivers out there. Trust me, they're nuts. So be very careful, be vigilant, and you have to be careful. Rav Shimshon Pincus, I saw just in last week, Parshas Mishpatim, he's talking about how a car could be a great tool, and but it could also be bad. Person has to know how to drive. If he's getting behind the wheel, and it's gonna be dangerous, so it's gonna get himself killed if he doesn't know how to drive and he's getting behind the wheel. It's the same thing when it comes to pain, afflictions, and difficulties, sicknesses that we get in this world. We have to realize that they're all part of Hashem's masterful plan, and we have to grow from them. And if we're not, then it's not going to be good. It's like getting behind the wheel of a car. And we don't know how to drive. We're gonna get ourselves killed. So we have to treat those difficulties that we go through seriously. Realize that they're from Hashem, and they're for our growth, and that they're for our reason. And with that, I'd reference the partial recording that we just this year that I just gave last week, and that I put up on last week's parsha on Vayichi, of why Hashem created illness. I thought it was a very clever shir that I put together, and I spent a lot of time doing that. Anyways, everyone should be safe. Have a wonderful day. Kol tov.